Welcome back, it's me, Lou. Alright, so for today's video, we are going to jump into the time machine and travel way back, 22 years ago to the year 2000, as we take a look at Mortal Kombat Series 1 Goro. So this is something that came out years ago, 22 years to be exact. It was produced by Palisades, and back then they had the license to create Mortal Kombat action figures. I bought this, I want to say maybe at least maybe 3 to 4 years ago. At the time, for some of you that remember, Funko, who makes Funko Pops, they were making a series of action figures. I think they were called Savage World, and the Savage World Fit line of action figures, they encompassed different properties. There was Street Fighter, there was Mortal Kombat, and they were like, Freddy and Jason and horror film characters. So what made that line, it was very short-lived. I think the line only lasted maybe just a year. It was a very memorable line for me because what that line did was they took popular characters from like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and they made action figures of them at the 5.5-inch scale, and they were done very much to look like vintage He-Man action figures. So during that period of time, I collected the Mortal Kombat line, and there was Liu Kang, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, a Sub-Zero variant. I think there was Raiden also, and then I was really just really stoked on that line of action figures. And then I kind of wanted to build it up, but there was always so many characters, and I wanted at least one boss character. So I kind of remembered that way back in the day, Palisades made a Goro figure, so I hunted this thing down on eBay. I believe there's 2 different versions of this. I think there's actually like a different paint scheme on the other version. But this is the one I got. I got it on eBay for a pretty hefty price because this is kind of hard to come by. As you can see, the figure is still inside the bubble. I'm never going to take this thing out. It's going to remain mint on card. Initially, I had plans to remove it until I realized how hard it is to come by this piece. Maybe in the future, if I can find one loose, we'll take a look at that. But for now, this guy is going to remain mint on card. As you can see, the label inside of the bubble fell loose, so it kind of just rattles around on the inside. The box itself is gigantic. It's a really large card. And one thing I do appreciate with this figure is that, now keep in mind this is the year 2000. Palisades had, they were like smart enough to know that this figure was going to be so heavy on this card that I'm sure you've run into this before, like with certain action figures, especially if you're like a collector and you leave your figures mint on card. Sometimes, over long periods of time, maybe a couple of years, sometimes the glue that adheres the bubble to the card kind of like either like lose its adhesion or maybe it disintegrates or whatever, and the bubble will just fall off. Palisades anticipated how heavy this figure was, and they were smart because they actually metal pinned the bubble onto the card. So you can actually hang this on your wall or off a peg and not worry about the bubble ripping off, because this figure is really, it's a hefty figure. Size-wise, this figure stands in at about 7.5 inches. And it's more of a statue than an action figure. I mean, if you look at it, the articulation is very limited. I believe the head rotates right there. But the arms, for the most part, you don't see any joints. There's no butterfly joints, no elbow joints, no pins. If anything, it's possible that the wrists might be articulated, but essentially this is a smaller statue. It's not necessarily like a full-on action figure. During the late 90s and early 2000s, that was a very common thing across different toy companies, including like McFarlane Toys. My theory is that collectors like me, by the time the late 90s and 2000s came around, a lot of us were probably in our like 20s or 30s, and we grew up during the 80s, and we were so used to like the action figures we grew up with, like G.I. Joes and Star Wars figures, where it was very limited articulation and the sculpting was just very generic and bare. So I think by the time most of us kind of like, you know, quote unquote grew up, you know, when we were in our 20s, we wanted something a little bit more sophisticated, I guess. And the big push during that time period was for like action figures that were borderline like miniature statues. You know, McFarlane, they had a long history of just producing stuff that were more like statues than action figures. And that's really the case here. You know, this is more of a display piece. But it's still, I think it still holds up pretty well. The sculpting is, it's nice. It was excellent for its time, but you know, if you were to compare it to like an action figure done nowadays, you know, compared to like a NECA, you know, this doesn't really have all the detailing and texture quality that like a modern action figure has. You know, even the engineering is this kind of like very basic. But this is an incredible display piece. You know, for me, I love Mortal Kombat. It's one of those figure lines that I'll highlight occasionally on my channel because I'm currently collecting the McFarlane ones. Storm Collectibles, they make a line of Mortal Kombat action figures, but those are a little bit on the pricier end. And then here's the back of the card. Mortal Kombat collectible figures, Palisades Series 1. You have Goro. There's Raiden. And as you can see, the articulation here is horrendous. It's very simple, very limited. It looks like only his arms move in his head. Again, that kind of re-emphasizes that these were more so meant to be like display pieces and mini statues as opposed to action figures. And this really captures the look of the characters from the first Mortal Kombat game. And then there's a bio over here. So yeah, this is Goro from the Palisades Mortal Kombat line. And then one thing I appreciate also is that you don't see this very often, but they give credit to the sculptor. And then the prototype and the painter, package design. I think that's great. You know, I think, you know, it's unfortunate that in like the world of action figures, they don't really credit the designers of the figures or, you know, the guys that comp up the prototypes or design the packaging. So I think it was kind of cool back then that they'd, you know, do that kind of stuff. So yeah, here's Goro. It's a cool figure. Maybe one day I'll find one loose and then I can share that experience with you. But for now, I just wanted to show this off. You know, if you're into collecting Mortal Kombat right now and the McFarlane figures and you need a Goro, you know, this is an option. You know, it's not going to be aesthetically on the same scale as a McFarlane figure. Let me grab one real quick. For example, here is Baraka. Just to give you an idea of the size difference and the quality of the sculpting. You know, Baraka kind of stands, like Goro here is hunched over, and with his stature, he looks a lot shorter than he should be. And the quality of the sculpting, it's nowhere near at the same level as a modern day action figure. But I think it's a nice fill-in. You know, if you need a Goro for your Mortal Kombat shelf, and you don't want to shell out the money for like the expensive Storm collectibles. But then again, this is kind of expensive too. But if you could find this cheap on the secondary market loose, I think it's worth the purchase. You know, it's Goro. Everyone loves Goro. So, alright, so let's wrap this video up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber viewer, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. Alright, later.